Welcome back. The standalone House GOP bill that would provide aid to Israel would add billions more to the U.S. deficit, according to a new report by the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, the CBO. The Republican measure would provide $14.3 billion in aid for Israel, but would also slash that same amount in IRS funding. Well, the CBO revealed yesterday those IRS cuts would lead to a $26.8 billion decline in revenue, contradicting new Speaker Mike Johnson's stated goal of offsetting the aid. That's because it would result in less money for the IRS to go after tax delinquents and therefore less collection of tax revenues. We can do the math. Joining us now, Democratic Congressman Seth Moulton of Massachusetts. He serves on the Armed Services Committee and is a combat veteran who served 4 tours with the U.S. Marines. Congressman, thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Good to see you, John.
Let's just start there with your reaction. This is Speaker Johnson's opening gambit. This is the first thing he has done under his new leadership, and it's a standalone Israel bill with offsets that are only going to add to the deficit. What's your take?
I mean, supposedly this guy is a super conservative, right? And yet he wants to dramatically increase the deficit just to fund Israel, not to mention politicizing the Israel aid package in the process. And let's just be clear. I mean, you said tax delinquents. This is enabling tax cheats. This is what the Speaker of the House thinks he should do to fund Israel, is enable tax cheats. And just as someone who actually pays his taxes every year, like, I think that's a bit ridiculous. And I think most Americans should agree.
And certainly, this is also, I mean, this bill certainly has no chance of getting through the Senate, and the president has already said he'd veto it. But it also includes no funding at all for Ukraine, something the White House wants in there. They want a much bigger package. How concerned are you that even if Israel funding eventually gets through, that the Congress may not provide much of what Kyiv needs?
Well, look, I mean, we have a lot of national security challenges around the world, and they're inextricably connected. Our allies' security is connected to ours. You know, when you look at Ukraine right now, I know people are frustrated that this is taking so long. I understand that that we all wish this were over. But look, Xi Jinping is the #1 observer here. He is watching what we do with Ukraine to see if allies in the West will stand together and stop this murderous dictator, his buddy Vladimir Putin, from invading a sovereign country. And, you know, he's going to take a cue from that as to whether he decides to invade Taiwan and risk starting World War III in the Pacific. So we have to set up a bulwark around the world against dictators, against terrorists. That's why the national security of Ukraine, the national security of Israel are fundamentally important to us here in America. And I don't understand why Speaker Johnson doesn't get that. But when he politicizes these aid packages, he delays them because you're right. The Israel package isn't even going to go anywhere in the Senate. He's ultimately impacting our national security here at home.
Yeah, and on the security of Israel, you recently wrote an op-ed which has the title, Netanyahu Needs an Endgame, the Israeli Prime Minister. Tell us what you're suggesting.
Well, look, this is one of the big mistakes that we made going into Iraq and Afghanistan, right? We had a military plan, but military plans aren't enough. You have to have a plan for the day after, for what happens after you achieve military victory. Now, simply getting to military victory is going to be hard here for the Israelis. This urban combat is brutal, as I experienced myself in Iraq. But after that, they have to have a political plan for the future of Gaza, because otherwise they'll just be right back where they begin. And even worse, if they leave Gaza a smoldering mess, they may actually recruit more terrorists to Hamas's cause than they kill. That's a huge risk for Israel. They need to be able to paint a political future for the peace-loving people of Gaza that's different from Hamas. Otherwise, they'll be right back where they started, potentially with even more terrorists threatening Israel.
And Congressman, before you go, we've been covering all week how President Biden recently signed an executive order on artificial intelligence. You've been very outspoken on the issue and have said that if AI is left unchecked, it could be more dangerous than the atomic bomb. Explain what you mean and what you think needs to be done.
Right, absolutely. I mean, look, AI is going to transform the world, and it can be fundamentally a huge force for good. But there are what we call these edge cases, these cases where our fundamental security as a society could be threatened. And the risk really doesn't come from bad actors here at home. It comes from places like the Chinese Communist Party. And so while these guidelines are a great first step, What we really need to do is enter into some sort of international treaty. This is like time for the Geneva Conventions on AI to prevent the use of AI in warfare. If we use AI in warfare, we're going to have a lot of guardrails, and the administration has made that clear. Our troops are going to use it morally, but we can't expect that of people like Xi Jinping in China, Vladimir Putin in Russia, and that's where this risk comes from. So while these AI guidelines here in America are a good place to start, what we actually really need to do is have some serious treaty negotiations with our adversaries around the world.
All right, Democratic Congressman Seth Moulton in Massachusetts covering a lot of ground for us this morning. Great to see you, Congressman.
Good to see you, John.